So there's a new Jubilee up, and it's called Trans versus Conservative. And Buck Angel, Buck fucking Angel, is on the cover of this. Now, full disclosure, Buck Angel is awful. He's just like peak true scum. Like he's a card carrier for turfs and licks their boots at literally every available opportunity because he wants to be able to curry favor with the anti-woke brigade, which makes him incredibly tea. And he is the cover for this new. And trans versus conservative men, is masculinity disappearing in America? And the answer is yes. And that's based. I mean, it's not that's not what's happening. There's plenty of masculinity going around amongst everybody. Everyone's allowed to be masculine. Everyone's allowed to celebrate the positive aspects of masculinity until the whole paradigm gets broken down eventually. Let's just hope that it does break down at the very least. Regardless, anyway, we're going to cover this Jubilee video. It is 45 minutes long, so I'm going to kick up the speed a bit because I hate watching things in normal speed. You all know this now. Can't watch things in normal speed anymore. Has to be at least 1.5 times for me to be able to watch it. Anyway, that's it. That's what we're doing. Let's go.
Middle ground is a social experiment that brings humans with opposing beliefs together. These discussions may contain viewpoints that are the result of misinformation. Remember to seek out experts and to be critical of your own biases while forming an opinion. Please see the humanity in each participant, and as always, we encourage empathy.
I'm glad that they admit that they just like by showing these people's opinions without prior context, they could be a vector for disinformation. Interesting. Interesting. At least it's good they're doing that now. They're doing at least some kind of viewer discretion at the start. Yeah, that's how bad Buck Angel is. Not even as bad as Calvin Garrow.
So when you say we're just redefining what being a man is, you have to understand you're redefining a fabric in society that has kept the human race and
these people speak too fast. I'm going to have to put it 5 times speed.
Got it to where it is today.
But do you see the state of our world today? It's not perfect, and it's been led by men like throughout all of history.
That Brandon Tatum. They got Brandon Tatum in
it. And look where it's gone.
Really embarrassing.
Step forward if you agree with the prompt. Masculinity is disappearing in America.
I think that masculinity is disappearing. I think that it's a concerted effort to emasculate men. I think that some people feel threatened by masculinity and the
got away with it. We got away with it. I managed to avoid looking incredibly racist.
The typical way that men carry themselves, leading families and different things like that. So I think that there's an effort to mitigate strong men in America.
There's a few different ways to think about masculinity, but just looking at kind of the definition of the term 50 years ago, you had people like John Wayne, you had Martin Luther King, you had Sean Connery. You think of like masculine features as in beards, hairy chest, big muscles. Think stoic, being brave, being rugged, being a provider. Today you have people like Harry Styles and Timothy Chalamet. You have people that are completely contrary to what we were looking at back then, and those values of those masculine characteristics are completely devalued.
I do believe.
I mean, why is it devalued? Can you explain to me how it's actually been devalued just by Timothée Chalamet and Harry Styles just existing in the public's face? The fact that they just there is just at least some non-masculine men in positions of what is considered attractive or what is considered famous or what is considered desirable, but there's some non-masculine men, and that just shows how threatened the concept of masculinity can be, such that not even trying to these kind of famous less masculine men being objects of desire existing in the first place feels threatening to these people. The fact that the paradigm is so easily shaken by two people rather than taking into account the totality of what people do and don't find attractive or isn't you're part of mainstream patterns of attraction. Because you look at Jason Momoa and people like that, these are all heartthrobs as well. So just taking two people out of context and saying, well, these people exist, therefore masculinity is being completely devalued. I'm like, well, no, it just means that there are more than an incredibly narrow way of expressing it. And also, interesting you find that they talk about being stoic, being brave, and being rugged or whatever. These kind of neutral characteristics. But then he specifically says provider afterwards. Well, that's what we need to break down. The idea that something that is specifically masculine is being a provider. Because something like being rugged, that's just a way of characterizing someone's physique or characterizing someone's gait or characterizing someone's way of being, rather, from an aesthetic sense. But a provider is a role, and that's where these differences lie. Why, we shouldn't have to care about whether someone's being a provider or not, or whether some part of the gender binary has to be valued by their ability to be a provider, and the other ones don't. Like, how many single mothers nowadays are providers, right? And they do an amazing job in every single household, even ones which have two parents. So even in straight households, there are plenty of ones where the feminine person has a provider role, and these don't not function. So this, again, all of these prescriptions they're making here based off assumptions they have about what they think it should be based on tradition rather than any kind of actual kind of internal iteration what these things mean.
That masculinity is going downhill, especially if you look at like the testosterone levels. Now the testosterone levels for guys is going down compared to generations before us. So yeah, I agree.
I mean, I've not seen any evidence. Right, okay. Let's do a quick Google. Male S over time. There's no sources for any of these. These are all by age rather than by period. I can't really verify.
Hi, I'm Gilbert. I'm 24 years old and I'm a conservative man. With my beliefs and having a trans man as my friend, we don't really talk about politics. Someone being trans doesn't make me like them any less of a person. As far as pronouns, when referring to my friend, I don't really use the pronouns that my friend would want. I just say,
what the fuck? How? They're your friend. Why would you not just use the pronouns? The fact that you just feel like so embedded in this ideology so far that you can't even bother to be polite. Even fucking Jermaine Greer, even like fucking arch-turf Jermaine Greer, explicitly says that she would be absolutely fine as a method of politeness, calling people by the pronouns that they have, rather even though not believing them to be proper women. Like, she goes that far, but this person, you're literal. I would not be friends with this person if I was trans. Fucking hell. I know, right? It's incredibly gross, isn't it?
Say my friend or I say their name, just because I feel like I'm giving into the narrative that men can.
Also, right? Let's be a little. Let me let out my inner chud here. How is this fucker gonna complain to anybody else about lack of masculinity or lack of testosterone? This little fucking bum fluff thing he's got going on here. Like, if I'm gonna be properly chud about this and just like release my inner chud here, this guy is in no way like an Adonis-like specimen of perfect masculinity, right? Of all the people to be critiquing a lack of masculinity in society, I'm like, it's fine that he looks like this from an actual, rational, reasonable perspective, but that's not what chuds would think.
Women and women can be men if I use the pronouns that they want.
I do see that masculinity is under attack completely, but my definition of masculinity, like you said, has a lot to do with the traits that are associated with it. As a gay man, I mean, of all of us, I'm not the most masculine man, but I do think that the good aspects of masculinity are definitely under attack, but I don't think that it's disappearing, it's just being channeled.
Tell me what these good elements are. Like, and what of these are not something that could be entirely relevant across, the gender binary, right? Like, if you can't tell me, what these particular things are, then why should I believe you?
In different ways.
It depends on how you look at it, because a lot of the traits can also be embodied in women and femininity. So when we look at masculinity, I think that we have to also look at what is the actual definition of femininity and masculinity. And if we're defining masculinity by being stoic or muscles or body parts, then is it really masculinity?
A lot of times when you guys spoke about masculinity, you associated with men being.
But I think that's reasonable because it's all aesthetic, right? Masculinity is, as far as I'm concerned, an aesthetic rather than a state of being or some kind of action.
Manly, but I think more women are embracing their masculinity. Masculinity is still there. I mean, just other genders are using it. Being courageous, being powerful, more women are standing in their power, which is again associated with masculine, but it's not specific to just men. Women are no longer submissive, they're dominant. Women don't need men, and I think that.
Well, am I right, guy? Am I right, fellas in chat? We want the dummy mummies. Let's go. Women being dominant, that's what we want. Fucking The new world order is upon us. Let's fucking go.
Most of America is realizing that anyone can be powerful on their own.
I believe that the masculine traits are inherently in men, and men have to take a position. You made a really good point by saying women are now becoming more masculine. They feel as if they don't need men, which I think.
Well, I think even this frame of reference where they're saying women are becoming more masculine by being dominant or being providers or using some or being powerful, whatever. The fact that we view that specifically as masculine, that's the problematic issue that I find, because it's by creating this dichotomy that leads to issues when people say, well, if you're acting in this masculine way, then that means it is what they feel is somehow analogous to being a man or manly, which means that you're outside of your gender role, and that's where these lines of oppression, these lines of where these issues stem from, is from people doing things that are outside their prescribed gender role. So getting rid of the role entirely is what is much better, and then leaving masculinity and femininity down to a level of aesthetic rather than some kind of societal role. I mean, that's also true, Amity Island, yeah, for sure, for sure. True metaphysical, let's fucking go. Also not forced, and also not the thing is, I hate the idea of forced feminization. The fact that it should feel humiliating, whatever, that these people with these kinks feel humiliated by being feminine. Whereas if it's something that is being done to give somebody some level of I can't think of the words, but if it makes them feel good, if it gives them some level of elation or whatever, some level of euphoria to gauge that, I think that's much better. Yeah, absolutely, Amity Island, but they just feel like they should be in they again, they're conservatives. They believe in hierarchy. One of those hierarchies is the deference of women to men at the end.
I think is the problem here. I think that the way we've been designed by God, in my opinion, is that men are to lead, men are to be strong, men are to be brave.
There we go. Men are to lead under his, you've all seen that picture where it's the umbrella with God and then Jesus and then the man as the family unit leader, right? They literally see themselves as the God or Jesus figure within the family unit.
Men have to take their rightful position. The way our country has been structured to this point have been because of strong men who have taken a stand, who have fought wars. Now I feel like it's getting so lopsided that our families are.
Yeah, if there's one thing that's been really good about masculinity, it's all the fucking wars they've started. Well done, Tatum. Well done, Brandon. Well done. All those people that died, that was a really good thing. That was a good thing that happened, all these wars that happened. It's like, well, the wars were going to happen. The people who fought the wars against the aggressors, those are the good people. I'm like, well, who caused the war in the first place, right? Come on.
Degrading. People don't know where they're at in this country.
Now in 2022, masculinity is being redefined. And I think what happens is people get upset when things start to change. No, I think that nobody ever wants to take that away from men. I think that what we want to do in the world now is start to understand what is masculinity. And it's always been really associated with this very machismo space. And now there's different kinds of men in the world. There's not just biological men. There's also trans men or people who want to be masculine. So I think what's happening now is people are pushing against change because change is scary and people don't understand. And so I think biological men feel under attack, when I think that's not what's happening here.
The point that you made is.
Okay, maybe I'm gonna have to agree with Buck Angel on this one. I think he's right in saying that a lot of people are just resisting change because change bad, right? Like, how many Daily Mail readers does it take to change a light bulb? No, I don't like change. I think he's correct in saying so. I don't like his framing or whatever. Like, they've seen pissing around with words like biological man versus trans man or whatever. I think that trying to over police languages like this when everyone understands the kind of things he's saying, I don't think is worthwhile. But we all know what Buck means by this because he's a true scum. So, and like one of the old school transsexualists who believe that trans men are still like women, just pretending to be men. I guess whatever. He'll say anything for right clicks.
Is 100% correct. There are different phases and people are experiencing it in different ways. The feminist movement I think they are attacking masculinity within men. I don't want a man to open the door for me. I don't need a man in my life.
Why is that masculinity to you? That's the issue, right? They're not attacking the problem is that this guy has internalized the idea that opening a door for women is somehow intrinsic to his own masculinity, rather than looking at for the action that it actually is and what it entails and what it signifies, right? You don't need that chivalry is a fucking garbage concept. because that's part of the gender role rather than, you know, the gender presentation, which is the thing that most people would take issue with, the actual gender role that's being prescribed. And, you know, and I think they're right to attack that. I think they're right to attack these paradigms.
If I can do all these different things, what
I'm going to say paradigm a lot in this video.
they're doing is attacking men, and that's what's causing the problem.
What part of the feminist group feels like...
Again, he sees, or you don't want me to open the door for you, therefore you're attacking men. I'm like, why is this so synonymous to you? I just don't get it. I just don't get it at all.
It's attacking, because I know that most feminism is like wanting equal pay or...
Well, you just said that women not needing men is somehow empowering. You know, having a man is somehow less empowering, or being an individual.
Well, it not being necessary to have a man is what is empowering, right? Feeling like that you can't, you know, succeed or achieve or be successful in general, or be seen as being successful unless you have a man. That's a very kind of, as you say, Amity Island, a very kind of, you know, nuclear family traditional idea, where they're not seen, if they're unmarried women were always seen as unsuccessful for a very long time, and that being removed, that is empowering, absolutely.
Individual is somehow less
But that's how
empowering.
women feel.
Right.
Women actually are saying that because that's how they feel. It's
But
as
that's not how every woman feels.
But no one's saying every woman. They're only
True, Amity Island, 100% true.
women speak for themselves. So
Right.
all of you are going to have different opinions as biological men.
Absolutely.
Women all have different opinions. Oh, you see a very specific group of women saying this.
Let me you did just say that's how women feel. So are you speaking on behalf of all
No,
women?
no, I'm not. Let me take that back. The women who are saying that feel that way.
Why do you feel that women in general feel disempowered?
No, I don't think in general. No. That's a generalized statement. You can't say that. I said
you're
the
the one-
women. No, I
you
did
said
not. I
women
said the
feel
women who
disempowered.
say that.
You associated somehow women are now embracing masculinity, which means that they are now more empowered because they don't need
They don't need a man,
or
right?
if they're
Men feel empowered when women...
See, just like how messy this conversation's got already. We're 6 minutes in, and they already can't even understand their own fucking definitions of what to be masculine is, or, you know, how one could be a masculine, whether women can, you know, exhibit masculine traits, and what that even entails. They're completely lost on all of this. They don't understand. None of this makes any sense. It just shows how fucking stupid and dumb these categories are in the first place. And like these prescribed roles are just fucking pointless.
But I don't think that women's empowerment comes from having a man or not having a man. So why is it always associated that...
Well, you didn't see that because you're fucking gay. You've never understood that, or a woman. So you don't understand that position. Like, you know, I understand that, you know, that's not to denigrate his own experiences, right? But if you're a gay man, you don't understand the... you know, how straight relationships are prescribed, you know, from a societal level, from a cultural level. At least not to the same extent, right?
you know, a woman's now empowered because she doesn't need a man. A woman has always been empowered. Women have never been...
But they never felt
That's
that.
not true.
I mean, if we go...
Yeah, that is like the biggest bunch of bollocks, right? You get telling Buck Angel. I can't believe I'm saying this.
Back to the 1920s if you're going to do that, but that's not
But
what
of
we're talking
course,
about.
you
We're
have-
talking about society right now.
Right now, you
People who were alive in the 1920s are still alive now.
actually think women are empowered right now?
Absolutely, women are empowered.
Who's the vice president?
And how long did it take for her to become a vice president?
There is a right.
I think there is definitely a certain degree in which the successes of the feminist movement up until now have given women the most empowerment now than they've basically ever had, right? And I think that now things are starting to become more equal, and I think it's good that we're focusing on men's issues a little bit more, right there, because it was previously the scales were so tipped in one way and basically every single possible angle, right? Now those scales have been redressed some. We're now suddenly seeing where the whole gender paradigm does affect men too. And I think it's good that we're now having this intersectional analysis moving forward. But to say that women are entirely empowered nowadays, rather than just comparatively to where they otherwise previously were, I don't think that. But they definitely are more so than they used to be.
Right and wrong way to be a man. Take a second to think about it.
No, there is no right way to be a man. There's no specific right way to be a man. Next question.
I think that when I originally heard the question being asked, I didn't agree with it, but men are not abusive individuals. Right. Men are not to be cowards. Right. Men are to lead.
There's definitely a wrong way. There's definitely a wrong way to be a man, and being abusive is one of those things, right? But that's not, anybody of any gender can be abusive, so who cares?
Lead their families. And men
why this has to be something prescribed into the idea of being a man or the role of being a man doesn't make any sense.
who do not display that, I don't believe that they are men, in my opinion. And all of the qualities that I see in my father is what I believe a man should be.
All of those characteristics are what make a man, and when I see a man be a coward in the truth, in just speaking the truth, or sticking up for what's right, especially today in America with everything going on, I'm like, those are not men. My name is Clarkson. I'm 24 years old, and I'm a conservative man.
Literally, like, this is just how fucking flimsy, like, especially anti-trans conservatives are. And they're just like, you will never be a man, you were born a woman, you will be a woman forever, you will never be a real man or whatever. Yet that's how immutable they think the idea of being a man is for trans people. But as soon as it gets to cis people, they're just like, well, if you are a little bit of a coward, then your man card is completely revoked. Their ideology is so fucking paper thin.
My biggest question for the other side really is, are you happy? Anybody that wants to fundamentally change society and change gender roles, to me, that's not happiness. And if we want to fight for acceptance, we need to start with acceptance, which is accepting society for what it is.
That is the most meaningless fucking statement I've ever heard in my goddamn life. That means nothing. You've just said nothing. Like also just happiness will come from acceptance. Oh well, if I just accept that, I'm just gonna be living in the drudgery of 9-to-5 work for the rest of for the next 50 years and then retire. That's fucking miserable. Why would anyone just accept things when they could make them better? That's just the conservative view in a fucking nutshell. You're just like, oh, it's the Jordan Peterson view. That's what it is. This guy's clearly someone who watches Jordan Peterson. Yeah, exactly. That's what happens when you shut the fuck up and you conform to the values that I hold, right? It's literally the Jordan Peterson's like, you should go clean your room before you try and change society, bucko. That's literally it. It's just, this guy's just a big Jordan Peterson simp. I'm gonna find their socials after this, and I will see if there's some Jordan. I bet you there's some Jordan Peterson in there.
At the end of the day, we're all men, and I don't believe there's any wrong way to be a man. We're just redefining what it means to be a man.
But there are things that naturally come to men. So when you say we're just redefining what being a man is, you have to understand you're redefining a fabric in society that has kept the human race and got it to where it is today. So just...
And that's almost led us to incomplete extinction multiple times. Let's just be clear. Also, right, can we just appreciate the trans guy's drip? I think they're rocking the drip today, and these fusty conservative men look like shit. Apart from Brandon Tate, who looks pretty cool. Brandon Tate has the drip, but everyone else on the conservative side, they look
like aimlessly throwing out, oh well, we're just redefining what it is to be a man. That's not just like a light subject that we should be talking about.
But why do they have to stay the same? Why do we need to have the same thing for hundreds and hundreds of years?
Do you not see the state?
It's not the same thing. It's just keeping the same qualities.
But do you see the state of our world today? It's not perfect. It's been led by men like throughout all of history, and look where it's gone.
So you're
true and based.
We're talking about redesigning what it means to be a man. So what do you want to bring to traditional men?
I think it's embracing that.
The problem, I hate to be a fucking manlet shamer, and then this is just me. Just pretending to be a chud, but like I do feel like the suit and tie that the guy on the far right on the conservative side, the suit he's wearing, it just kind of look like he's like a Saturday kid at Dixon's because it just doesn't quite fit correctly, and the tie goes down to like below the belt buckle. Which, yeah, it's a bit cringe, but it is a nice suit.
You can be vulnerable. I think that a lot of men want to portray strength, but men are people, and I know that men have feelings.
Being a man and masculinity, those are two different things. And I believe that we can redefine whatever that means to anybody by including other types of men or other types of masculinity. I myself am a father, I have a child. Some people would disagree with me being a father because I am transgender. But that being said, I present to the world as male, my child sees me as a man.
There's proper ways to be vulnerable, right?
Yeah, but again, why am I agreeing with Buck Angel? This is bad.
You don't have to break down in front of your family and cry. It's okay to suffer in silence as well. Strong men, I believe, exude the qualities that you guys are referring to. I think the problem...
Yeah, if the guys who suffer in silence end up fucking killing themselves, Brandon, in Minecraft.
The problem is overcorrection, right? Some people believe that men need to cry and lay on the ground and be feminine, like women. My name is Brandon. I'm 30.
I mean, ideally, there should be, some kind of unifying understanding that like continually breaking down to the point at which you can't function because you're so upset all the time is bad for everybody because it impacts your overall executive function, right? Regardless of gender. But things are sad and you're allowed to show emotion about them, right? Not hard. That's a really good point, Amity Island, actually. Redesigning what it means to be a man, but yeah, it's this concept of what is manly and what is masculinity and what being a man even is, and it's just it was always been so murky. all the people, all the conservatives who have their own like internal prescriptions of what being a man is, it's all different to them. All of these people have different ideas already, obviously with only minor differences, them being from the same ideology, right? It's just so weird how they feel like things are being wholly redefined.
34 years old, and I'm a conservative man. I had a lot of curiosities about what it's like to be a person who believes that they're a trans man. I feel like God has created all of us very uniquely, and although I have beliefs and I follow the Bible to the T, I still want to know from other people what their experiences are. It doesn't mean I have to agree, but I really want to know what other people are feeling from the person who's experiencing it real time.
I have male privilege.
Actually, I have a kind of soft spot for Brandon Tatum. I do genuinely think he's a nice guy. He just is an idiot. And if you watch enough of Brandon Tatum's content, you will realize that he's just very stupid. But I don't think he's nasty or that he is vindictive or anything. And any of the things that he believes or says, I just think a bit thick. To a limiting traditional masculinity means repressing and cutting out the unique parts of yourself. True. Oh my god, that is so true. Martin Jackson. And conservatives claim to love individualism. Yeah, exactly. It's individualism from an economic level, but not from a personal level. You have to conform to the cultural hierarchy, but if you don't, then you get cast out. But when it comes to the way in which you're engaging in from an economic level, it's completely different. Well, I guess this is what kind of separates like the tradcons from the neocons, I guess. Whereas neocons don't really care about the cultural issues; they just want to have a free market for as long as possible.
Oh, so.
I've lived both lives, and I can tell you firsthand that it does exist. I am taken much more seriously in my career since I transitioned as a man. Prior to transitioning, I would work just as hard, if not harder, for the same position and not be considered. The minute that I transition, I am immediately taken more seriously. I can give you an example. Obviously with COVID, there's like the mask mandate, right? So I have to tell customers all the time, they need to be above your nose, right? All day. My manager who's above me, who is a woman, will have to go to them, tell them they give her a fight. But the minute I just look in their direction, it's up. It doesn't seem like a privilege, but it is because now my manager has to work 3 times harder for something that's so simple.
I think the word privilege is the thing that turns a lot of people off with this conversation. But that being said, again, myself living my life as a female, pretty much half my life, and then now half my life as a man.
Yeah, the God that I believe in believes that all conservative men should have to wear the little hats with the little helicopter blade. If they don't conform to that, then they're not real men in my religion as well. So
There is no way I could not be honest about the fact that my life has changed drastically. Also being a white man, that's also a conversation a lot of people don't want to have. But I have privilege of being white and privilege also of being a man now. I can walk into any room and command that room in a heartbeat because people just do that with men. And I think the thing is that biological men are born into that space, so they'll never ever see it. Why do we now, as women who have become men, get to have this thing? It's 100% because we are men. We look like men. Nobody would ever know. No one would ever know that we used to be women. So it's actually a real lived experience.
I have a feeling that the trans guys are just going to absolutely roll them on this question because, and Buck Angel is correct. I can't believe I'm saying it. Buck Angel is absolutely correct here in that because they have, the kind of standpoint these people have about where the experiences that they've had. They know both sides of it. They know the cultural prescriptions they get from either side, whereas people who are assigned male at birth, they don't get that. They don't get the ability with which to see it from both sides. Like I'm not a believer in standpoint epistemology, but what I can do is understand why people would come to certain conclusions based on their experiences, right? Even though the overall data that you would just look at, and you can look at from an objective perspective rather than a standpoint perspective. You can look at the objective data and understand the ways in which women aren't taken as seriously, or the way in which society prioritizes men and masculinity over women and femininity, right? You can just look at the numbers and understand that. But the people are more likely to believe those numbers if they have those experiences. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, exactly. Like people, like whenever you talk about lived experience, you'll get a bunch of conservatives saying, "Well, this is just new Marxist standpoint epistemology." Well, I'm not saying that it's more true because of the experience that these people have, but you can understand why they come to the conclusions they've come from based on that experience, and that's a good way in which you can look at how people interpret data, the way people look for data. Right? You can understand people's viewpoints and by those structures. Like I'm a structuralist myself, so. Exactly, Amity Island. Yeah, there's a really interesting study that was done, which was about people judging whether women or men talk more. And when they polled the women and men in the study afterwards, the men, like I think, thought that the women talked for like 70% of the time against 30% of the time. The women thought it was about equal, and in actual reality, the men talked for 70% of the time. It was completely flipped. Really interesting study.
So I agree with a lot of what you all are saying as far as like transitioning. But as a black man, privilege looks way different for me, because if I'm walking down the street, then I'm seen as a threat by police, by women, by anybody else. Being seen as a man is where my privilege stops and where everything else begins. So I don't see it as privilege.
Okay, I got a lot to say about this topic here.
That's an interesting perspective from the black guy there, though. I think that's also very true. In that, being again, it's all intersectional at the end of the day, right? And that some privileges that you gain from transitioning from female to male, if you're black, then you lose a bunch of those privileges that you otherwise would have had because of your skin color, because you get targeted by the police. And obviously, black men in America are incredibly, horrifically oppressed by the criminal justice system, and that's something that he has now transitioned into, rather than transitioning away from a relative safety with regards to that. So it's interesting looking again. It's all about intersectionality, isn't it? It all comes back to intersectionality at the end of the day. But I am going to predict everything that Brandon Tatum says from this point on. He is going to say, well, privilege is only privilege if you believe in it, and that what you should be really thinking about, instead of the structures in place, is thinking about how you can best overcome them yourself. And this negative thinking is only going to lead you to LDAR, sorry, rather than actually push your problems head on by picking up your bootstraps. And even then, the privilege doesn't exist. It's going to be some garbled point like that. That is my prediction. That is my prediction about what he's going to say.
Here. And first of all, I mean, we have to be transparent and honest with each other. You know, I think that not everybody on this side presents 100% like a man. Like if I saw you in the streets, I wouldn't think you were a man. You know, men have it really hard in this world.
I'm sorry, what? Are you high, Brandon? And again, it's just because he knows. It's because he knows these people are trans is the only reason why he's saying it. It's the only reason why he's saying it.
And they've always had it hard in this world. The wars have been fought by men. They've died in the hundreds of thousands. Men commit suicide more. Men work more the dangerous jobs. You know, if somebody broke in this place right now, who are they going to expect to defend everybody in here is going to be the men. If your family fails, they're not looking at your wife. They're not. They're looking at the man. You know, I just want people to understand it. There's some advantages that men have, and then also men do struggle in custody and all kinds of different things.
100%. I 100% agree with you as a man now, right? But I think my perception of it is different than yours.
Okay, so he has outperformed my expectations there. And again, I think it's true, and the things that he's saying there are true. We've got to think of how the structures have come with which to create that paradigm, right? Are men the ones going to war, or men's the one who are seen as failures if the household isn't correct or whatever? If the household fails, if the family fails or whatever, for some reason, and how a family can theoretically fail, but whatever. Like, are they being seen as such a way because people see them as lesser? What's the position in society that gets them to that point of responsibility? Is it, because people think of them as lesser? No, it's the opposite. It's because people do not underestimate. They think of them as being so strong and so far at the top of the hierarchy that anyone who doesn't, perform at their, supposed prescribed role in that hierarchy is seen as a failure, right? So that is a point at which the heightened idea of what a man should be, based on societal expectations and understandings of men at the top of the hierarchy, that's how that manifests in a way that hurts men, which again is different to the way in which things are, the disadvantage you have at women, in which people don't take you seriously. You're not seen as part of the top of the hierarchy, and that's where the difference comes in. But he's absolutely correct in saying that there are plenty of things that are disadvantages for being a man. And I would absolutely agree with him, and I'm glad that as time has moved on, as I said before, that we now notice this kind of stuff, and that do men not get custody because they're seen as people who can't look after children? I mean, yes, partially, but I think it's mostly because people default to seeing women as caregivers, and that's the issue that we have. Again, it's all like I said at the start. It all comes down to just the idea of having gender roles in the first place is bad. But he was the one at the start of the fucking video. Brandon Tate was the one at the start, right at the start of the video, saying that to be a man you have to be X, Y, Z, and he's now saying, "Oh, there's a disadvantage that you get for men being prescribed X, Y, Z." And I'm like, "Well, can you not see how these two positions you have here are completely contradictory? Where on the one hand, men have to be brave, stoic, rugged providers, but on the other hand, is that that means that you end up having to go to war or have to be the one in the coal mine or whatever." And I'm like, well, how about we get rid of step A and then you lose step B, and then that makes life better for everybody, so they can just take on whatever particular role they want rather than having prescribed to them by some fucking bullshit cultural standard that people might not agree with in the first place.
Because you were born male, you were raised male, you have a whole other space in that, and I totally respect your opinion on that, and I believe that that is a true lived experience as a born man.
Yeah, and let me add with the black man, because we have a total different reality in that. I don't, in no way, form, or fashion do I go into a room and I feel like I'm less than. I think I command presence when I go into a room because of the way I'm dressed, and I'm tall. I go in the streets. I've never had a person cross the street. I've never been attacked by a police officer. I was a police officer. I've been pulled over probably 3 times in my entire life.
I mean, my biggest question with this and why I don't necessarily agree with it is because when it comes to privilege, there's not really a way to quantify it. It's very subjective. So like your version of male privilege and your version of male privilege are very different.
So it's hard to see the other side because you never lived it.
Yeah.
The difference between you and us is we see it because we've lived it. You have not. So it's easy to speak and be like, well, it doesn't exist. Well, how would you know?
Well, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I think everybody has certain privileges, but what I think the question here is what defines male privilege over women, because women have privileges too. Right. So is there a graph that you guys are calculating to make men have more than women, or what?
The privilege is not acknowledging what you have that comes so easy.
So do you think that your fear, because you live both sides,
Right.
do you think your fear is something that you have in your mind, or you think it's a
No.
reality? Because
No.
no, let me say this: you never really changed as a person. You're the same person
Right,
that you were.
exactly.
So you have the same physical capabilities that you did when you were a woman.
No.
You don't.
No, my strength is entirely different after
Well,
taking
what
hormones.
percentage would you say?
More than 100%.
Okay,
I weighed
so, but
like
you're still
100
not,
pounds,
but
now I weigh like
you're still
133.
not probably as strong as me.
But it's not about strength. It's that
Or-
women are targeted.
I mean, that's the problem is there, Brandon, is you've just said, well, you're not as strong as me. And I'm like, well, look at you. You've been a police officer forever, and you clearly go to the gym, right? But, there are scores of men, plenty of cis men that are not as, physically capable or strong as, plenty of trans men, because trans men end up with the level of testosterone that most other cis men have. Especially if they transition early, you're not going to know the difference. And the strength capabilities that they're going to have, especially if they're training or whatever, or working out, it's going to be way higher than a lot of other cis men.
Men are not targeted. I mean, maybe sometimes. I'm not saying it's never going to
They're
happen.
targeted by other men.
Right. But women are targeted by other
homicides.
men. I think women have less of a safe space.
I
That's what I'm
disagree.
talking about.
Men don't have a safe space. If you go to certain
But I'm talking
cities,
about
they get murdered by
okay,
other
but I'm not
men
talking about certain cities.
more
I'm
so
talking
than
about
women.
everyday life.
Yeah, every day.
Not
I think
certain
that's a
cities.
blanket
Have
statement.
you been attacked as a woman?
I have.
I have been pressurized by
I've been
men.
raped,
Yes.
I've been attacked, I can go on and on and on. I was homeless, living in the streets, raped all the time. It happens, it's a real thing. I didn't see the guys on the street getting raped, but you
But
go.
men do get raped. though.
100%,
But we're
but
not
the
making it-
experience of
Do you get
My prediction about Brandon Tate was completely wrong, actually. Which it's nice that we are now getting to a point at which conservatives are understanding the idea of the way in which societal structures and paradigms can hurt people, right? That these, at least looking at something from the idea of structural advantages and disadvantages, which is what I was thinking he wasn't going to do in the first place, right? Because conservatives believe in this just world fallacy where everyone's in the position that they are because of things that they've done, or because of the position that they're in is somehow justified by actions taken previously. But they've kind of moved past that at least somewhat and understand the way in which culture and society is is created by superstructures that feed into the cultural narrative.
That's all down the street, like.
I mean, women say things to me. When I was
But
a
do you
police
feel
officer,
threatened?
Do you feel
Share
threatened?
them.
You feel empowered though, right?
no, I don't feel empowered. I feel that's
But do you feel
disgusting.
scared? Do you feel threatened when a woman
But I
catcalls
don't,
you?
no, I don't. And
Okay, then.
I don't feel threatened if a man
Right.
try to
Because
challenge
you have
me.
that male privilege.
Right. But as a
What
woman,
if, a
it's
man,
different.
what if a man was whistling at you when you were walking down the street?
I've had it happen to me. I had gay men whistle to me,
Then how
but
does that make you feel?
I don't care.
Okay, cool.
I mean, as long as you don't touch me and we cool.
Right.
I know you may think I'm attractive.
Right, and
That's
I
fine.
think-
That's cool. I get it.
think women will say the same thing as long as you're not like trying to be predatory. And I've seen it because I go to clubs with my friends who are girls, and I have to tell the men to literally leave them alone because they keep going and they're predatory and they're literally scouting out for women that are drunk or whatever, not even drunk. She could say no 1,000 times and they're still gonna bother her. But the minute that I say something, they stop.
Women are not as strong as men and they get targeted. Sure, yes, that is a privilege that men have over women, but that doesn't mean that men have privilege because of that one situation. Men commit suicide way more than women do.
Because if we're going to go that route, trans men commit suicide twice
No,
the
right,
rate.
but that's not
No, don't counter it like that. Don't just talk about the reason why these suicides happen. You literally have someone on the conservative side who earlier in the conversation has said you shouldn't be allowed to, there's only certain emotions you should be allowed to be able to express as a man. He's already admitted that in the conversation. You want to actually turn around to them and say, well, why are men committing suicide? Why do you think they are? And then you go, well, it's because of these prescriptions about the way in which men are allowed to express themselves emotionally that you've prescribed earlier in this conversation is the reason why these suicides happen. It's the structure that is at fault here, right? It's the structure that's at fault in the first place. Again, for most of these things, and it's not women who are putting that onto men; it's men putting them onto each other because these are the people making these prescriptions.
I think what's important here is to distinguish the fact that yes, no one is negating the fact that women get preyed on. There's situations where this happens, right? Like no one's going to deny that. But we're also just trying to say that it's not like a one-sided coin here, where there's no like men are just we just have it good and we can do whatever we want. We can't even be the next Supreme Court justice because it's like.
But again, I live as a man, so I see the difference. Yeah. When I said I have privilege and I walk into a room, of course. But then there's other things that are expected of me now as a man that I would never knew were expected.
So
of
would
me.
you guys agree that there's such thing as female privilege?
Oh sure, 100%.
My wife has privilege because she has me.
That's right.
So she don't have to worry about her
Right
safety
on.
because I'm there.
I don't believe that as a man, it's like.
No, that's literally the opposite of privilege, right? The idea that you can have your own level of security in yourself because you are a man and people won't prey on you normally, but she has to have you there, Brandon, to protect her. That's not a privilege. That is the way. That literally shows us why she doesn't have, because she literally needs you there in the first place. I did tell you he was stupid.
There's marketing for women-owned brands. Like I said, I can't be the next Supreme Court justice. Like women are very much more empowered today, which I think is, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, like, good for you. But I think that the man I probably have privilege because I'm, 6 foot 210. Like no one's.
That fucking things. They just don't understand the idea of affirmative action. Like, I have my own gripes with affirmative action. It's a really kind of murky concept. But just something like, well, we've had literally the entirety of Supreme Court up until now has been men apart from 4 women. The idea that we're going to redress that somewhat with one new appointment, that's not you being oppressed, mate. That is just making up for the fact that up until now, the female voices on the Supreme Court have been incredibly minor in comparison to the amount of male voices that are present. And these people are all fallible. Like the Supreme Court's full of fallible people, right? It's full of people who make decisions based on their own experiences. They're not entirely objective. And once you understand that there is a level of subjectivity that goes into Supreme Court decisions, then you need a level to which all voices are represented based on that level of subjectivity. Otherwise, if you have 9 men on the Supreme Court, that's going to be 9 people who have subjective views shaped by life as a man, right? So subjective views based on life as a man. Is he really kind of cute? I don't know. I'm not into men, so I can't comment. Like, the way in which you have to literally go down baby steps and speak to conservatives like talking to children about incredibly simple concepts like affirmative action, it just drives me around the bend.
Picking on me when I walk down the street. I used to live in Chicago and I used to walk home all the time at night, but was that smart? Probably not, but I felt a little safe because, I'm not 5 foot, 100 pounds. I'm Max, I'm 29, and I'm a conservative man. In today's society, women and men can be whatever they want and can be as successful or strong or as big of a leader as they choose. So I'm just wondering, in a society that is so seemingly level, more level than ever before, why are we transitioning to different genders to find, and what are we looking for?
Biology determines gender.
This one's going to be fun.
So.
Oh no, Buckangel, no, don't do it. Have a heart.
Sex and gender, people try to argue that they're different, but sex and gender actually go hand to hand. And our biology, being a man, comes down to every fiber within our body. So whether that be DNA.
That's just wrong. It's literally just wrong. Science says you are wrong. That's just not true.
DNA, chromosomes, testosterone levels, bone density. There's a whole bunch of different factors that go into it, and it all has to do with biology.
So a bunch of different factors. Okay, well then you've explained it very well. How very succinctly explained how, sexual characteristics can be to infer, the overall sex of a human. brilliant, great.
Biology, I 100% believe in biology. Today we talk about biology being a social construct. I disagree with that as a transgender person. I was born biologically female. I always acknowledge that, and today I live as a male. Now that being said, sex and gender, they are trying to separate those things. Gender can be, I've chosen my gender. As you see, nobody would, I think, probably understand that I used to be a female. Now many people do, like you just said, believe that sex and gender are one thing and you can never change those. I'm not trying to change anything. I'm trying to show the world that this is how I feel by presenting the outside. But I think denying biology is where we get into a lot of problems.
If you want to
Bad things, 'cause I think what you said there isn't massively objectionable. It's not huge. Like, I understand a lot of his viewpoints are shaped by him being like having transitioned a long time ago. I'm gonna try and be as charitable as I can to him, but like, again, saying that I really don't have to get in an incredibly long conversation about why. It's not a biological conversation. It's a philosophical conversation. It's the philosophy of science that we get when we talk about the way that that sex is kind of assigned, right? People say, well, sex is observed. Well, no, you observe new characteristics, and then due to the typology that you scientists have chosen, that gets assigned as male or female. That's why we say assigned male or female at birth, or intersex in some cases now that we actually understand that aren't as rigid as you like. And you take secondary sex characteristics, primary sex characteristics, hormone levels, chromosomes, and things like that, and gametes. You take all of these things into account, and then you make essentially an approximation. That's why we call it a bimodal distribution. There's two incredibly high peaks where the vast majority of the population fit into the two modes on this particular spectrum. But then, as soon as something changes, you're just outside of this particular this prescribed binary. It's so I don't want to get into it. There's better people than I have explained this further, but that's what I'm trying to get at. So this whole idea of biology being something that you can't change is true. Like, you can't change your biology, at least the kind of immutable bits of that. But there are plenty of things that we would use to understand how someone's biological sex is constructed, such as secondary sex characteristics, and what kind of hormones that you have. You can change. You can actually go back and change these things that would originally be part of the whole, cluster of properties that we would use to assign sex with, right? So if you change your hormones levels, that will also change some of your secondary sex characteristics as well. And also, there are things that we use to change primary sexual characteristics too nowadays as well. So it's an incredibly murky concept. But I don't want to get into it too far, as again, I'm not great at explaining these things in a way that people outside the trans community are going to understand perfectly. But that's a pretty long digression. But the idea of gender and sex being different, that's just a scientific fact. I don't have to explain that at all. Well, exactly, yeah. Well, like Buck Angel's hormone levels aren't biological. It has manually replaced all the estrogen in his system with testosterone, and hence why his secondary sex characteristics have changed in accordance with it.
Be seen as a man, then like,
Right on.
who are you to? I don't care. I mean, you do you, whatever makes you happy. But I think like it becomes a slippery slope. It's like, how are we going to deny basic human facts? Like, there's two
I think that
genders.
causes problems, and it causes problems for me.
Yeah.
Because the minute I start denying your biology, now you feel attacked by me. Right. And I don't want you to feel attacked by me. I never want you to feel, I want to be a part of, if that makes sense. You don't have to agree with my choice of how I live my life, but all I ask for is respect.
What do you have on your driver's license and your birth certificate?
Right,
Did you change it to male or did you change it to?
So that being said, I transitioned to live as a man 29 years ago. So that was way before you see any of this stuff. And I had to acknowledge my biology, right? That being said, my license, I've traveled the world. It has to say male. Can you imagine if I showed up at the airport, they're like, female? Dude, there's something going on here. But I actually got my birth certificate changed to male. I was the first person to do that here in Los Angeles. But that being said, I kind of think that it might have been a mistake to do that now, looking forward today, because I never thought we would be having this conversation.
I'm glad you said that, because I love that people can express themselves. We live in America. It doesn't matter what I believe, what my religion is.
Why would it be a mistake, Buck? I don't get it. Why is this conversation change the mistake that you've got? Because again, the birth certificate and the passport and the driving license, all that kind of stuff, then you understand, Buck, that the actual utility, the actual function of these documents is just to be able to live in the world and use them for an intended purpose, such as crossing borders or sending off to your bank to open a new bank account, right? So that's what the function, the utility of these items actually is. But you're just saying that due to some vague notion of what you were at birth or what your biology says, when these this completely would ruin the utilities of the actual individual things that you're trying to describe here. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know what he's saying.
I love that people can live their best life. I'll never ever in my life protest or try to go against a person who wants to identify. The problem is when you begin to try to change language and you begin to try to change reality, and then therefore it changes.
No, but these are people who don't want to change language. Like the issue is that conservatives are the ones stuck in the fucking brain poison, where they think that somehow changing the language will immediately change what the person is on the inside, right? And also these are the people who just don't get the way in which these things work. You remember all the very famous conversation, right? It's between Blair White and Ben Shapiro, and they're having an argument about the use of pronouns, because Ben Shapiro had this fucking delusional idea that everyone has biological pronouns, and that you use the pronoun based on what someone is assigned at birth, right? Even though their biology changes, but that's a digression, right? So in the conversation, Blair says, but that there's no utility to any of this, because if you saw Blair White in a bar and you wanted to point her out to your friends, you would say, that woman over there, go talk to her. They would not say, that person over there with the long hair and the tits who looks like a woman but's actually a man, and the person with the long hair who looks like a woman but is a man, you should go talk to him. No one would say that, because there's no utility involved in that. And these people, that's why the conservatives are denying reality, because no one would look at Buck Angel and use she, her pronouns. Literally no one in the world, unless you knew he was trans and you were deliberately doing it because you had some, like, weird fundamentalist understanding of how these words are used. Because language is a descriptive tool that we use. We use new language as a tool to describe things, and then we use the thing that creates the most utility in those instances. I understand that, these people have a different, compass than I do, and I'm very much utilitarian with regards to these things. And the way in this would actually function in the real world just makes it completely delusional of people.
Is on the children, and all of that becomes problematic. If a person says, okay, I acknowledge I'm born as a man or a woman, but I want to identify as this, cool, I respect that. And even if I didn't want to see it that way, and some people may be a little more ambiguous, I wouldn't never disrespect you. I'll call you by your name.
That's right.
Whatever name that you want to be associated with, I'll do that. And I think if everybody in the country can get on that same page, I think we'll see less division.
I've noticed in a lot of the trans individuals that I've met, the older generation who had it a lot harder in society to be accepted is a lot more willing to have the conversation.
We didn't have social media. I didn't have cell phones. I didn't have computers when I
You're all right, Captain Quantum. How are you doing this afternoon? I hope you are doing well.
transitioned. This is how you build bridges. I'm Buck. I'm 59 years old, and I'm a trans man. Because I'm an elder trans man now, and there's a much newer generation, there's a definite space where I have a different way of being than the younger generation, and why I tend to call myself a transsexual man. And I believe in biology. I believe in binary. So it really does not necessarily align with a new thought process that is happening with a newer generation.
So I love this question. With trans folks, biology does change. Our bone density does change. Our muscle structure does change.
True and based.
Our testosterone levels do change. So biologically, we do change. Anatomically, now that's where surgeries come into play. So when we're talking about biology and gender that can't be changed, our biology absolutely and concretely changes.
Not the DNA.
But our
DNA does not change.
Yeah, DNA is not going to change for anyone.
So you acknowledge there's a biological difference between males and females, because some people on the other side would say
There's a biological difference between the four of you sitting right there. There's a biological difference between a cis woman and a trans man. These are biological differences as well as physiological differences, as well as a difference in gender presentation and in gender identity as well. The fact that they have these two concrete boxes that they're trying to fit like these square pegs into these round holes is why this thing doesn't work.
a difference, like a female, like I could look like a girl, not having testosterone, but I'm still a male.
Some people are male, some people are female, chromosomally. But when we start to take testosterone, our bodies do
There are some people who aren't male or female chromosomes. Well, right?
biologically change.
But what about trans men who don't take testosterone?
Then their bodies don't biologically
That means that they're
change.
biologically still female, right?
Well, and gender in itself is something we get to choose. Okay,
That's right.
just like you said.
Well, in your life, you get to choose. Not
That's
you don't
right.
get to choose it.
I don't think you really choose it. I think it's something that I think that most trans people would say that they don't choose to be transgender. It's something that they are. Whether that be something due to nature or nurture doesn't really matter. But once you can't just extract your own gender identity and change that willingly. You have to. A lot of people will try and repress, and it doesn't work. You end up having to accept it. Go out and shoot. I don't know why he calls himself specifically a transsexual when he thinks that sex is some kind of immutable construct, right? So I don't get why he calls himself a transsexual, but whatever. It's Buck Angel. His points are incredibly messy and incoherent.
For the world, but you get
No,
to choose
I
one
get to
life.
choose my gender because I've been on testosterone for 10 years, okay, going on 11 years.
But there's some anatomy that will never change.
That's right.
Right? I mean, you'll still have ovaries. You still have,
Yes.
the female reproductive system. You
I mean, you can have that. You can have hysterectomy, and you can get, bottom surgery.
said that you had a child.
Yes, I've given birth. I no longer have female reproductive organs.
Right, but you had that. You will never get male productive organs.
Now, when you think about it, the male and female productive organs are similar, and they're nearly the same. They're different.
Right.
They're different in size.
Even if
Okay, biologically.
And they're
they're
different in functionality too.
Not necessarily,
Well,
because the testes and ovaries are very much similar. One is an egg. One is a fertilizer.
But
And
we
that's
can
And I think this conversation just gets pretty much. I don't think this is a conversation that necessarily needs to happen. Although there is the chance that there's going to be some idea of reproductive system transplant as well, which is fucking wild. Like, again, not I care about, but the science isn't far away.
never,
Different.
but I never can produce sperm.
You're absolutely right.
Ever.
You're absolutely right.
And they can never produce ova.
And you guys are saying that gender is like a social construct. Is that what you're saying too? That you could change it? But also, if you want to be technical about it, age is a social construct. Your ethnicity and race is a social construct. And I'm Hispanic.
Time is not a social construct, though. The way in which we understand time, the way that we've divvied it down into years, minutes, seconds, these measurements that we have of time, these are social constructs, right? Because we have chosen to understand time as this particular breakdown, this particular system that we use to understand time is through things that we've constructed ourselves. But time in itself is not a social construct. It's whether or not we decide to understand it in seconds, minutes, or hours. If seconds didn't exist and we only did things in minutes, right, the time would still be passing. But because of the specific intervals we've chosen, that's how we construct time within society. So if you are 25 years old or whatever, you're only 25 years old because that's been socially prescribed or culturally prescribed as the measurements that we are going to use to call what 365 days is. But if that construct was removed, you would still be the same age overall because time is not socially constructed. Simple. I mean, not simple, but yeah.
I can't say I'm Chinese because I like Chinese food. I could bleach my skin all I want. I could wear Chinese clothes.
No,
but I'm
race is
Chinese.
not.
It's a
How
social
is
construct.
ethnicity going to be a construct?
It's all social constructs.
So
We all
how-
agree
how-
on it.
how exactly-
If you look up, is race a social construct?
Race is absolutely a social construct, right? In much the same way as you look at a mixed race person in America, they'll almost certainly be treated as black because they don't have a white skin tone, because whiteness is the socially constructed understanding of the way in which race functions in America. But if you're a mixed race person in Africa, people are going to see you as being white, or at least not as black as everybody else. It's clearly socially constructed. The understanding that people have of what constitutes being racialized, or what constitutes being part of the dominant racial hierarchy, is completely different, no matter where you are on the planet, right? It was obviously socially constructed. Like the melanin in your skin, that's not socially constructed. That is observed. That is a fundamental thing that is observed, and then we prescribe race onto that, right? Or based on a certain face shape or certain kind of hereditary, some kind of physical hereditary features that people can then map onto certain racial dynamics. So it's obviously socially constructed. But the problem with trans, I don't want to get into a transracial debate. It's too fucking complex, and I don't know about it.
Construct, ethnicity a social construct, is time a social construct? Right. Everything's a social construct if you want to think about it that way. But we have set truths.
Yeah, people talk about clines nowadays because race is so murky as a concept.
And we can't change those truths. If you want to say you're a trans man, that means you're a biological female that thinks that
No,
you're a male.
I am a biological male. I'm anatomically.
See, he's gonna have a different
I'm
version
still.
of it than
It's an interesting way of putting it. I would think of it, yeah, like again, who cares? I just don't think this conversation is relevant. Like I would call him being biologically female, but he is a man. He's always like that's how I believe the difference between sex and gender. I know that a lot of people in the trans community massively disagree with me. I think Malcolm probably would explain a lot of these things better than I would. Go check out goddamn Malcolm's channel. He's really. But whether or not you describe him as being biologically female, anatomically female, or whatever, that doesn't matter because he is a man, and unless you're his fucking unless you're his fucking gynecologist or you're his doctor or his some kind of medical professional. That's of no interest to you. Like, that doesn't make any difference. You're never going to interact with him in such a way that his biological sex is in any way relevant. And the way the kind of structural way in that he's treated is almost certainly going to be a way. The way he lives in society is almost certainly going to be through the lens of being a man, right?
And I think it's really important to understand
and,
we're all
and,
gonna
and
have
it's
different views.
anatomic, okay?
Yeah.
Because biologically, I have shifted, okay? Trans meaning going from one to the next.
Biologically and all these things, I know that there's importance for you guys, but meeting me or seeing me, you would never know. So why is it important?
Well, no, because
I'm just
say if I was
curious.
a woman.
True and based, just what I was saying. Absolutely. Just does not matter in the slightest.
Just say if I was a woman and I wanted to date you, what are you going to tell me?
I would tell you that I'm trans.
Yeah, no, I'm saying you can't tell me that you're a man.
I mean, I'm still a man.
No, but you
I'm a
got to tell
transgender
me.
man.
You got to tell me that you were born a woman. You have to.
I mean, I don't have to.
Well, because if I go down, if I see
Right.
you in your pants,
Right.
I'm going to see something different, and that will be troubling to me if I had an expectation.
But again, this is like leading off the topic, but I mean, to answer your question, if you must know, I do tell the person that I'm talking to or interested that I'm transgender. I don't think that you need it to, you don't need a penis to be a man. And I know that you may disagree, which is fine, like I get it, but I don't want one.
Now, I have a question for all of you. Do your penises make you men?
Yes, biologically.
Is that what makes you
Well, I
men?
said being a man's ingrained within every part of your body, so our cells are
Right,
yes, our
but
penis too.
if you had to look at the difference between us and between you, now would that difference be the lack of a penis?
If we were naked.
Okay.
I mean,
So
it
if
would
we're
be-
gonna minimize being a man to that particular anatomy,
we didn't minimize
No.
it.
I'm asking the question. Okay. If we minimize it, because this is where we're going, is anatomy, right? Because that's where we've gotten.
Basic
Okay.
biology, yeah.
So if we get there, so do your penises
It's lucky, guys, so based.
make you more men than us?
It's part of
It's
what
not making
does.
more or less. It's we're a biologically man. You're not a biological man.
It's not a spectrum,
It's
so
from-
it's not a question that we can answer because you're saying on the spectrum, would this make us more of a man than you? But no, it's because we are a man.
But it is a spectrum. It is absolute spectrum. Because again, even if you're talking from a biological level, it's still down to multiple different factors. There are plenty of cis men who will have XX chromosomes who will never realise that they're intersex for the entirety of their life, but they've been assigned male at birth because of some other set of because of the genitalia or
And you guys aren't.
Well, we're different.
So we're not men.
We're
Is
different.
exactly what you just said.
In my view, you guys are appropriating the gender, and you are living as a man. But
oh, this guy's pulling out the SJW points here. Gender appropriation. Let's go.
biologically, you are not a man. So to me, it's not. You can't say, okay, well, does that make us more of a man? That's not even a question to ask because you're not a biological man. When it comes down to asking questions that make me start to change what the truth is and what the truth isn't, putting it on a spectrum when it's an objective truth, that's where I draw the line.
What's the biggest problem with
Not an objective. It's all socially constructed.
what he said? It doesn't make what you feel any different. The biological truth is the truth, and why can't that be the truth?
Exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Amity Island. Like the genital preference thing we're talking about. Well, literally, if I pull down your pants and I see the wrong things, I'm like, well, that's an incredibly specific situation in which 99.99% of trans people will just tell people before they get intimate. Like, but this idea is like, well, no, it's the same reason when you talk about before we give you respect due to being a man, can I see your penis or whatever? It's the same reason why they say if you're a trans woman and you can't come into the women's changing rooms to prove it, we're going to do genital inspections on. That's the end point where this fucking like anti-trans logic and where this anti-trans rhetoric gets you. These genital inspections, because these people, everything just boils down to the genitals end of the day. What about the penis? Right? That's all it boils down to.
Then you also say, but I feel like on the inside that I'm a man and I'm going to present that way.
The argument is that people try to invalidate who we are with that. I'm not saying that you guys are doing that, but a lot of society in the world does that. Well, biologically, you're female. What hurts trans people that people don't realize what they're doing is it's very harmful. You got to be aware of what you're saying and what you're putting out there. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's why I think we all agree. We would never try to offend you or anything like that. To be honest, if I saw any one of you in the streets, I don't care. It's not going to bother me that you want to.
Right.
I would know unless I pulled your pants down or something.
Right.
Why do you feel like you have to present the way you do? You know, facial hair. Could you
Right.
be a man without having facial hair?
I mean, yeah.
Because you feel like you're a man.
I'm in the early stages of testosterone. I haven't hit 1 year yet. But personally, for me, I crave, having a full-on beard like these fine gentlemen and you guys are. Like I crave it, But I do believe not having like this little small peach fuzz I have going on, it does make me feel more dysphoric. It makes
mean, this guy's is doing pretty well on his voice for someone who's not been on TV for very long. It's pretty impressive.
Me like feel like, oh, this is how I presented before transitioning.
Do you feel like it's something that has gone wrong at birth? Like, you know, you're born and you say, well, genetics and evolution says this. Why do I feel like this?
Yeah,
yet
I mean,
I have
I think
this?
questioning it was something that I always wondered, because sometimes when people say like, oh, like it was a choice, which I hear a lot on the other side all the time. Like, it was a choice. I was legit born this
Hey, Freddie, how you doing?
way. Like, I could remember from, I think, 4 or 5 years old, where like I didn't feel like a girl, you know what I mean? And I can't tell you why that happened. It was just my path in this life, and it's something that I honored. And you know, it was really hard for me to continue living, especially when puberty hit. You know, like time of month comes in, obviously anatomy
True, Amity Island, so true.
changes, like, and that was the biggest thing for me, where I knew that like, okay, I can't do this. It's like you're not in your own home.
Children should be allowed to transition.
Oh god, no, I'm gonna have an aneurysm. Oh no. Be prepared for the absolute worst takes from people who do not understand any of the transition process, or any of the medical knowledge, or any of the gatekeeping, or any of that. They literally understand none of it. They're gonna make so many points that are just based on like complete fabrications due to the way the media that spins this shit. So brace for impact, everyone, because you're gonna see the worst takes imaginable.
Well, I was gonna say, I find it very interesting that you and I are the only ones that stepped up, especially since we're younger. And
You should allow children to feel what they feel, because I felt the way that I felt for as long as I can remember, and it's something that I cannot deny.
Yeah.
You know, although my mother is supportive, when I was younger, I wasn't allowed to wear boys' clothes because that wasn't right. Now I know we're talking about transitioning. It doesn't always have to be hormones. It's like transitioning in society, so being able to dress more masculine.
Yeah.
I did when I was younger, but as I got into middle school, kids change, people are mean, so you know, I dressed how I would in society, so I dressed like a girl, whatever, but I think that children should be allowed to express themselves in whatever way makes them feel comfortable.
yeah. Kids are struggling to be who they are, and there's more rates of suicide for trans individuals because they're like, there's literally being laws put in place to prevent them from being who they are, and that's not right. That's not right.
There's the new Texas bill, which is literally going to prosecute parents for letting their kids even socially transition, and they're going to prosecute people who don't snitch on other people as well. It's absolutely fucking repugnant.
Okay, so I work with children. This is where I have like the biggest problem with the trans stuff, is with the children, because people, like, I'm sure you guys would agree, you want to inject them with the hormones to stop their puberty, their normal.
That's right. Okay. So we're starting off with the misinformation right from the beginning. This is exactly what I knew would come up. Puberty blockers are not hormones. Let's get that incredibly clear to start with. They're called euproline and triptorelin. These are hormone blockers. They do not change any of the hormonal makeup of the child. They just stop it from stop the child from going through puberty until you take them off of the blockers, right? They're not injecting any hormones into any children below the age of 16. No one under the age of 16 is ever getting cross-sex hormones. They may be getting blockers, which stops them going through puberty, in which once you take them off the blockers, their puberty just starts again and just happens normally. That's what blockers do. But no one is getting cross-sex hormones under the age of 16. That just isn't happening.
Normal puberty. They haven't even developed the prefrontal cortex yet, and they want to stop their natural puberty from occurring to affirm their gender, and then later on they regret it.
No. Not stop it from happening. Prevent it from happening until they decide one way or the other. Because if the gender dysphoria does not persist, you come off the blockers, the puberty just starts, and it's like the blockers never happen, right? Or there are some things that may change somewhat in development, right? But you don't then, the puberty then does start again at the very least, right?
I think that's not a good thing.
See, that's why this is a loaded question, because transition can mean many things for children. Now, I totally, as a transsexual person, disagree with giving children hormone blockers, medication, surgery, but what I do agree with is socially transition.
Even Buck Angel doesn't know. You've been trans for 29 fucking years. You know they're not getting hormones. You know they're not getting surgery. You know none of this shit happens, right? Just talk about the hormone blockers. Because that's the bit that we're having a discussion on. Because the only thing that you're being given under the age of 16 is hormone blockers. Other than that, it's just socially transitioning, right? That's literally the only piece of medical intervention anybody under 16 is getting. Yeah, exactly, Mr. Miraculous.
Transitioning, which means what? Because I did that, okay? And I did that in the 60s and 70s. My parents dressed me like Buck. I was a boy. I didn't have any problems because I just lived, we used to call it a tomboy, right? So that was totally, and I went through puberty and I did all the things. I do not believe children can make those choices, and I do not believe it's okay and ethical for a parent to make those choices for a child. But I do believe gender dysphoria exists in children. I had it, 100% it's there. But to give medication to a child is so unethical to me that you would actually, you're exactly
what I have to talk about is Gillick competence. So essentially, the same thing that we have so in UK we have a thing called Gillick competence, where there's a certain level of psychological understanding for medical procedures that we allow children to be able to give consent to, right, based off some kind of psychological evaluation. So, for example, this is the kind of thing that we have. I thought you were muting the stream, Amity Island. But yeah, what was I gonna say anyway? I just completely forgot what I was gonna say. Oh yeah, he's if he understands that. I've completely lost my point there. I've lost my train of thought. Let me just listen to that again.
Like, fuck, I was a boy. I didn't have any problems because I just lived, we used to call it a tomboy, right? So that was totally, and I went through puberty and I did all the things. I do not believe children can make those choices, and I do not believe it's okay and ethical for a parent
See it that way, and some people may be
education to a child is
Right, okay. Gillick competence, that's the one. That's what I was talking about. Thank you, Freddie. Gillick competence is what I was talking about. And so once you get that psychological evaluation that means that you consent to something as a child under the age of 16, right? The reason that we have Gillick competence is so that children, when they are under the age of 16 and still under their parental consent for the vast majority of medical procedures, say for example a child either has sex consensually or non-consensually and they end up getting pregnant, Gillick competence means that they are allowed to go to a doctor, get an evaluation that allows them to consent to have an abortion without needing parental consent, right? So, for example, imagine a situation if you are, if you're a girl under the age of 16, and then you end up getting pregnant, but your family is incredibly Christian and thinks that abortion is wrong, but you don't. Without Gillick competence, these people would not be allowed to get abortions, and this is removing their bodily autonomy, right? So by the people, the transphobes, especially the women, the TERFs, who are saying that we should remove Gillick competence so that children can't consent to being going on to doing puberty blockers, because literally again, if they're children, that's all they're going on is just puberty blockers, right? If all they're doing is going on to puberty blockers, then if they want to remove that, then essentially you're removing the ability for kids under 16 to be able to get abortions without parental consent, which is crazy to me.
Is so unethical to me that you're exactly what you said, you're stunting brain growth, you're stunting all of these things. They don't have enough research on it. So I'm in agreement with transitioning medically for children is not okay for me, but I do believe in a social space.
When you say a social transition, it's interesting to me because we can't control what happens in a social situation.
That's right.
So to me, and we talk about suicide rates among young trans people, this whole ideology is telling people to derive their value off of what somebody else is saying about them or what somebody else affirms.
But that's not what the ideology is saying. We just literally have scientific documents. We have studies. We know for a fact that people not being affirmed in their gender identity, regardless of what they're choosing, regardless of what the ideology says, we know, regardless of any of this, we know that people being affirmed in their gender, if they are trans, by their parents, by their friend groups, by institutions, by the culture and society in general, makes them far, 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 far less likely to commit suicide than if not, right? This isn't anything to do with the ideology. This is just literally how this shit works on a cultural, societal level. That's just what all the science says. I don't know why he's trying to pin this to the ideology. Well, I know I can think of why, and that's because he wants to be able to dismiss any of the scientific claims without bothering to interact with them. Or he doesn't know. He just thinks that that's what, and just trying to find some kind of way to weasel out of the fact that these fuckers, these people who think that we shouldn't be allowing trans children to at least socially transition, even not just remove all the medical thing, just socially transitioning, just allowing them to live and be affirmed in the gender that they are, right, or at least that they're identifying as at that time, which leads to a quantifiable drop in suicidality. He wants to be able to absolve himself of the fact that him and people like him, blood is on their hands in those cases, right? I hate to use emotive language and to go incredibly far, but that's just literally the truth. And the longer society goes moving towards some kind of level to which we at least give some level of affirmation to children whose gender identity does not match that with which they are assigned at birth, the happier these people are going to be, and the fewer dead trans kids we're going to have. Simple. That's just how that's going to work.
affirms to them. So we say that, society is the problem, and
people will keep saying things like, oh, well, you're just using these incredibly tragic situations to agitate for political causes. I'm just like, well, hang on a minute. Is that the same as when we have when there's like a mass shooting in the United States? If there's a mass shooting, is it politicizing the incident? If we talk about gun control afterwards, absolutely it's not. I mean, people say it is, but, those people are idiots, right? But the vast majority of people would look at that and say, okay, there's been an incident with guns. Let's have a look at gun policy that we can make sure these things doesn't happen again. The same thing can exactly be said with trans kid suicides or men suicides as well. Like, suicide just doesn't happen in particular groups because of no reason. There's clearly something going on that means that men and then also trans people in general are more likely to commit suicide than the rest of the population in comparison. We have to understand why that is and then take measures to rectify it. In the same way that we can look at, the United States and the UK, see which one has more gun deaths, and then understand the difference in those policy platforms.
we're not allowing people to be who they are, and that's why they're committing suicide. But maybe it has to do with the messaging that we're sending to these kids, that you derive your value from if somebody uses your correct pronoun, or you derive your value if this person accepts you for wearing.
It's nothing about value. It's nothing about value. It's about, just internal happiness, really. And if gender being a social construct, if people don't acknowledge that, it's going to be upsetting regardless. And it would be upsetting for you if you were somebody who was cisgender as well. If you lived your life as a cisgender man and everyone kept calling you woman or calling you she/her, you'd be as upset too. Yeah, basically true, miraculous.
Address, be who you are, but tell them to be empowered about it and not get that empowerment from somebody else.
Like, I'm not saying there shouldn't be more research done on hormone blockers and the overall long-term effects, right? They're still, as far as I'm aware, reasonably up in the air at this. That's my understanding. But all of the evidence we currently have says that it's absolutely fine. So why should we move away from that?
That's right. I feel like that's really kind of inconsiderate to say that someone would take their own life because what someone else says. To somebody, that is important. To somebody, I know have friends who their family does not use the correct pronouns and they've transitioned, they live in the same household. This person struggles with depression and anxiety. Could you imagine living in an environment like that where you're no longer validated? That's coming from your own parents.
But if you base your validation off of other people, this is a hard truth, but if you're...
It's like saying, well, if you base your validation on other people, then you need to look internally. I was like, hang on a minute. Well, this is just like, hang on a minute. If you were in a relationship where someone just just replaced your name with cunt, right? Called you cunt forever, you would not be happy. That would not lead to a happy existence. This idea that other people's opinions or other people's understanding or comments about you or the way in which they talk about you doesn't affect your internal mood state, this is fucking ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
No, you definitely have to do it. Listen, I could give a shit what things about me. I do what I want. But for everyone, that's not the case because everybody has different personalities.
Right, but that doesn't make it any. That doesn't mean that.
But still, what you're not acknowledging though is that in that environment, it is not supported.
I'm acknowledging that. I'm just saying that we're saying that for some reason they should look for that validation from somebody else.
When you love somebody and you have a family, you want them to.
But you're focusing not on the individual. You're focusing on the people outside of that individual.
But the individual,
I'm focusing on empowering that individual.
But part of being a person is needing to be validated. You don't need to be validated ever in your life from your family or your friends.
I get my validation from within, and then the.
Right, but if we're talking about children, okay, if we're talking, okay, I was an 8-year-old when I found out that I wasn't biologically male, right? I was 8 when I found out that I wasn't the same as my brothers, okay? And so going through that process, I attempted suicide 4 times because my mother was like, well, you are a girl. When you're 8 and you're 12 and you don't have anyone else that is in your space, when you don't have anyone else that lives in the same house as you to tell you you're okay.
It's frustrating these guys didn't have the facts on hand. Just say, just look at the studies. Just look at the studies that show that suicidality in trans people goes massively down when they are affirmed by people around them. It's just simple facts.
Where are you supposed to go? How are you supposed to garner your own self-validation if the people that are raising you don't validate who you are?
As a father, my duty is to raise my children the way I believe is right. And if my child somehow struggles with this, which is fine, we'll have that conversation. But I'm going to let it play out the way I believe it should be played out. And at 18 years old, you can do whatever you want to do. If you don't want to wear dresses, that's fine. I mean, just wearing if you want to dress like a boy, don't make you want to be a boy. Don't mean you have to be a boy. My mom was a tomboy, and my mom had me and my brother, and she's a woman, and she lives like that. But you may want to dress a little different. Maybe a boy want to do cheerleading or something like that. Right. But that don't mean you need to transition to something else. So I want that to play out.
No one's saying that. There's this fucking delusional idea that transphobe thinks that the transgender ideology wants to take literally every single gender non-conforming child and then transition them into a specific social role, which is just bollocks. It's just literally not true.
until my child is old enough to make that decision on their own. Also, you have to teach your children to have balance, because if you just want mommy and daddy to acquiesce to everything you want, that's not reality. You have to understand that mom and dad may not see me this way. They love me. I see myself this way, and I disagree with how they speak to me or how but I love them as well. I love, like my son, if he said it, he was, and I'm a Christian and I don't believe in homosexuality. I don't. I respect anybody that feel that way. I never, protest you at all. If my son came to me, it would be a struggle for me to want to go to his wedding. I'm just going to be honest. But I think that my son should understand, this is the way my dad feel. I love him. This is the way I feel, and we have mutual love. And that don't mean I hate you. That just mean we disagree. And I wish that same sentiment would be, and I think it's the same on this panel.
There's not disagreeing about something like your opinion of the Star Wars movies, or like disagreeing on the opinion of how you like your coffee. This is your disagreement on like a fundamental aspect of someone's life and their relationship that you're going to have to deal with. And I actually genuinely believe that. I don't think that Brandon Tatum is a vindictive enough person to refuse to go to his own son's wedding if his son was gay. I just don't think that would happen when I actually think about it in real life. Once you get away from these kind of rule sets that you set yourself by ascribing to some kind of religion, doesn't mean that's going to override someone's internal sense of love and sense of companionship with their own fucking children.
Like, there's no hate in any of this. I love every single person on this side, and we may think of things differently, but we love each other. It can't be one-sided.
I am lucky, I'm 41, and I'm a trans man. One of my greatest fears
And I'm based
as a trans man is my life being taken from me because I'm a trans man. Transitioning in a black neighborhood with gang members as neighbors, they weren't having that. So the more that my body started to look a lot like theirs, I was challenged on a regular basis. I was beaten up because someone recognized me from prior to my transition and approached me and confronted me and called me a liar and told me I was a bitch. And I, out of safety, was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they cold cocked me, and I lost a front tooth.
I grew up with a positive father figure.
What? Why are they asking this question? This is rancid. Come on, Jubilee. I was going to say you're better than this, but I know full well that they're not better than this. It's like literally going, oh, well, you don't have the father figure, you must be transgender. Jesus fucking Christ. This is bad.
This is good.
I think for me it's surprising, because I would believe.
What did I fucking say? What did I fucking say? This is so painful.
That a woman or a person who's born as a woman who now identifies as a man didn't have a positive role model as a man, and therefore they felt somewhat insecure as a woman, which makes them, feel a certain way and want to be a certain different person. Maybe they want to be the man that their father never was, or whatever the case may be. And so it was very interesting. I mean, being honest, it was interesting to see pretty much a majority of you guys come forward.
That's so great. I think that's really important that you say that, because I do think a lot of people probably feel that way about guys like me, right? That our fathers we didn't have the right upbringing. My father was amazing. I grew up really like a little boy. I always felt like a little boy. My parents actually raised me, and I'm 59 years old, so that was in the 60s and the 70s when we didn't even talk about this kind of stuff. But my parents actually felt it from me. So I think that that's a misconception that people think about people like us.
Any good father pushes their child to, one, feel self-love, and to feel like they can be who they want, do what they want, and have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Like our founding fathers. And so it's fatherlessness, or having a missing dad, is one, a pandemic on its own, and it's one that obviously I'm sure Brandon can attest to. It's so critical to have a father in the house, because kids get lost.
I mean, I disagree. Like, I have an incredibly good relationship with my dad. Me and my dad get on like a fucking house on fire. Like, literally, we will go on holiday and we'll still play cricket in the garden. That's how close me and my dad are. Love you, Dad, if you're watching. But this idea that a father figure is 100% necessary, again, it's just born down to this regimented idea these people have of what prescribed gender roles should be, but just doesn't play out in the real world. And we have evidence of this in the, lesbian parents, the children of lesbian parents don't turn out majorly differently than those of straight parents.
Lost when they don't have one, and having a father that's loving and strong and someone you can rely on is the reason why we're all comfortable.
The issue with single parenthood is that the single parenthood is the issue, because you only have one person with which to generate emotional support from, one person generating money for the household. That's the issue with single parenthood, not having multiple people in the household with which to perform an emotional connection with. It's not to do with a lack of a father figure. whatever.
Both who we are.
I had several different father figures like in my life. So it wasn't, I had a dad, but then I had my grandfather and I had my uncle. It takes a village to raise a child, right? But all of those different perspectives
True. It does take a village to raise a child.
raised me as a well-rounded human. Like, if we take the masculine
Buck Angel's a trans ex-porn star, I believe. He's now like a activist. He's quite old.
out of it, just as a human, I got to see different perspectives. And so now as a father that has given birth to a child, and that child being a male, right, I'm able to raise him with those same ideals that I'm able to identify because of the father figures that I had.
I didn't have my father growing up. He was not present in my life at all. So it showed me that some men can step up, like my grandfather and my stepfather, who have taken me in and showed me how to take care of myself, how to be, strong and dependable. And all I've been able to do is give more love to all people that I interact with.
Right.
So it was really important for me to have those figures.
I think this is a really important thing to show people that are watching this, because a lot of times I feel like we can blame any issues in society or anything that arises on the generation that came before us. So any issues that arise in our society, it's like, there's not always a reason why it's happening.
To be fair, that's not. It's usually that we usually blame the generation after us and say, "Oh, that it's being ruined by the next generation or whatever." I think it's kind of an anomaly now. We literally have an entire generation whose future was taken away from them by the previous generation. I think that's a pretty new paradigm. Just me.
We just need to address the issue and solve it.
I grew up with a lot of women. My parents were divorced, and I lived with my mom. I had my aunts, so I was raised by women, but my dad was there sometimes, and then my stepdad took me in as his own, so I had my stepdad as a father figure.
I grew up with all women as well. My mom used to tell me I have to be your mom and your dad. So like there'd be times where I got both. Like she was super sweet with me or really strict on me, and like she taught me a lot as well. Like growing up with women, it taught me a lot of vulnerability.
And when you were talking to, I was like, I relate to you very well. But yeah.
I'm Jacob. I'm 27 years old, and I'm a trans man. So the relation with my dad and how unsupportive he is has been a challenge for me, but it's something that I've learned to grow past. And I encourage everyone that even if you don't have a parent who is supportive, to still be authentically yourself, because your life is meant to be lived for you. And I think that choosing my happiness above all else has made my life that much better, and I wouldn't change anything. Even though he wasn't supportive, I still wouldn't have him here.
Listening to all your guys' points, I would definitely say, yeah, I did have a father figure. He was in the Marines, and he has this very toxic masculinity mindset. A lot of anger built up that I can definitely tell he suppressed, in the Marines, because that's what he was taught to do. That's what the Marines are about. He always carried that with him, and I think that's what he tried to instill in me and my siblings at a very young age, which made it hard for me to be vulnerable with myself. And I just saw a lot of anger issues that were, very violent sometimes. And since coming out as trans, I feel like he's been more willing to understand me more and trying to figure out who I am as a person. And because of that, I feel like our relationship has definitely got a lot stronger since then.
I can't imagine how difficult it is to come home and then try to be vulnerable after suppressing so much pain and hurt for years. So it's good to hear that he's learning and kind of evolving and opening up. That's something where you guys are talking about vulnerability, right? And it's like there's times when it's good to be hard.
I don't show emotion as much as I'd like.
That segment was nowhere near as bad as I was expecting it to be. Apart from Brandon Tatum, but at least he had it was a thrown the other way by people.
I definitely have sensed and noticed since transitioning that being on testosterone has made me cry less, which is very interesting because I believe that before I transitioned and started taking testosterone, I feel like...
Why would you name yourself off the character from fucking iCarly? I mean, that takes some serious balls. To have the choice of a name and choose the kid from iCarly. That takes some serious balls.
Not being able to cry as much, it makes me I'm like, damn, I wish I could cry right now, but it's not gonna happen. Hi, I'm Gibby, and I'm a trans man. Before transitioning, I guess only presented as lesbian, but since transitioning, I've been able to be more comfortable with my sexuality. I've definitely seen on dating apps and stuff, a lot of conservative men fetishizing trans individuals, and it's interesting because a lot of the time they say that they don't identify as gay or within the community, and yet they're fetishizing my community.
So I don't know about...
I mean, that's also probably true as well. But changes in your hormone makeup also just kind of changes the way in which your body reacts to stimuli in general, things like that. So things that are more likely to make you sad when you're on estrogen are more likely to make you angry if you're on testosterone, right? I've noticed that. I'm less angry now. I'm more stressed a lot of the time. I get stressed a lot, but that doesn't make me angry. It makes me frustrated and sad.
About you guys, but I always speak my mind. If I feel a certain way, I'll tell somebody, and that probably cost me a lot of relationships, but that's just how I am. So
I don't think there's anything wrong.
God, I fucking hate those people. Those people are the fucking worst. I'm like, well, the thing about me is I always speak my mind. I'm like, well, no, that makes you a sociopath. The rest of us have a filter system where we'll think, I might not say that. It might upset people. Like, that's a pretty American thing, just like this fetishization of some kind of lack of decorum. Very strange to me.
I know we talked about vulnerability, you know, a long time ago. I don't think there's anything wrong with being vulnerable. I think, like we said, there's times and places for it. Knowing when it's okay to be vulnerable and being self-aware of that, and then, you know, being strong when you need to, and being sad, you know, when it's appropriate. But I certainly am not as vulnerable or not as emotional as probably I should, because it's not something that I always did growing up. But I don't feel like I have any real.
I wonder why that might be, Mr. Conservative Man. I wonder what, gender prescriptions that have been thrust onto you have taught you the idea that, showing emotion is bad and that you don't do it as much as you should. I wonder. Stroke your beard. Who could possibly have thought such a thing?
Issues like suppressing. I just feel like I kind of get it out in other ways.
Yeah, that's great you look at it like that, because I believe for me, like my personal experiences, like because I was one, to transition at a very young age, and my dad being in the military, being a veteran, he would see me being vulnerable at times, and he'd be like, well, don't you want to be a man? And that would make me feel like, oh, am I not supposed to be vulnerable anymore? Now that I'm going to transition. And it was just like very hard for me because, like I said earlier, it was hard for me to have that father figure at that time of my life.
My process of, digesting emotions is by myself, and I use that time to self-reflect. So if I'm feeling angry, or if I'm, feeling really passionate about something, or whatever the emotion is, sometimes I pull back and I don't show that emotion because I'm reflecting on it and trying to understand why it's there. So I think a lot of times people can think men aren't showing enough emotion, but in reality, they're just self-assessing why that emotion is there in order to see what it's trying to teach us.
Right. I think when I was female, I was much more angry. I was just reactive, angry, like, "Argh." And then as I became a man, I cry more now as a man
Yeah, go for it, Freddie.
than I ever did as a woman. And I think it's because I'm at peace with myself. And so before I was just so angry about being a woman and everyone calling me she and seeing a girl, and I was a fashion model. So that really just took it to a whole other level. And then once I became a man, it was like, whoa, I can actually relax. And I think I do the same thing. I self-reflect on myself. I want to be this type of man that is more vulnerable and that is more accessing my own emotions.
Thank you, everyone.
Right on. Thank you.
That's cool. That's cool.
Okay, so that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. There was definitely some really iffy points, right? Obviously, the trans guys kind of carried the flag there, showing like the right-wing guys, the flaws in some of the systems they did. I could have argued better. There's a bunch of points they could have brought up to counter that, and I mentioned them in my reactions. But overall, that could have gone worse. That could have gone way worse. So I'll take that. Considering in the expectations I had for that video in the first place, yeah.